These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. This episode of the Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Defend Security Cameras. And we are flying right now. We're flying across the Pacific Ocean, and this is a new record for me for distance traveled to do a podcast. From my front door to yours is 8,277 miles. I don't know what that is in kilometers. I do know that it is that this trip one way is exactly a third of the circumference of the planet. So we're in New Zealand with Darren from Avon Valley Safaris. And Darren, I am amazed at this operation, but I'm curious why you chose safaris in the title of your business.
That's a good question, James. I guess if you look at the outfitting in New Zealand, in my time especially, and so I've been involved in this industry for just over 10 years and the hunting industry for a lot longer. In my time, people have always referred to businesses that were involved in hunting wild animals as either outfitters or a safari operation. And so I decided that safari was probably a more fitting word because it covered everything we do across a whole business, not just the, I guess, outfitting, where I see that more related to game hunting.
And when people come to hunt in New Zealand, they might think about fly fishing in a trout stream, something like that. What I bet they don't think about is what we did today, which is take your boat out and started the day with some spearfishing. I don't know if I saw a single familiar species. Everything that I saw was new to me. And I love that. I love learning about new species and new places. And I also love killing and eating them. And we already got to do a bit of that here on the boat.
Yeah, for me, James, it's really important. We're based in the top of the South Island, and there's a lot more for me personally in New Zealand than just hunting. And that's, like you say, we've got great freshwater fishing. We've got great hunting, but we've also, especially in the coastal areas, like so where we are, we've got amazing ocean opportunities. And for Avon Valley and for myself, I'm incredibly passionate about getting people out, getting on the ocean, spending some time, whether you're a free diver, whether you're interested in deep sea fishing or chasing, your yellowfin kingfish, those types of things. There's just such an opportunity. And if you look at time-wise, and we've spent a little over an hour and a bit getting out to where we wanted to fish today, and a little over an hour and a bit getting home. And so that, we can get a very full day of excursion, and we can include free diving, we can have tank diving, we can be just bottom fishing, and the opportunity to take the different species and education, and then to also share some of that and as a food is really important to me. I spent all my life on the ocean here and in the hills, and that's where our source of protein comes from.
And that very much shows up within what I've seen so far of the menu at the lodge. Rob Gearing from Spartan Precision is the one who introduced us, and he said that your chef was Michelin star quality. That might get thrown around a little bit loosely in the world, but in this case, I don't think that's an exaggeration in the slightest. And I've been fortunate enough to eat at a couple Michelin star restaurants, and I've got to say the food there was not as good as it is here. And I think that part of that is that everything on your menu is very much connected to this place.
Yeah, thank you for the compliment. I strive, and I say my whole team at Avon Valley strives very hard, and Mark, our chef, is somebody very special to me, and him and I share a real passion around the connection between food and having visitors, having clients in the lodge, and the opportunity to showcase cuisine that New Zealand has, but done at a very, very high quality level, and connecting that whole story, whether it be, collecting seaweed and pickling it, or whether it's a specialist dish from some berries in the mountains added to a venison or a fish or a lamb or a green lip mussel or oyster. I absolutely believe that as your host for the week, it's my duty to make sure that I showcase and educate you as much as possible around the different opportunities within New Zealand.
Yeah. With any adventure, I think it comes together when you have some stress, when you've got some movement, some travel, and you start to develop bonds with the people that you're doing that with. But then when you put that together and you harvest something, right? Whether that is an abalone off of a rock, which we did today. That's the first time I've ever got to dive for abalone before, or the fallow deer that a couple of the hunters have taken already, or the red stag that a couple of the hunters have taken already, or like you said, some of these berries and mushrooms and things that your chef is spending hours and hours out actually foraging on the land itself. When you put all of that together, all of that effort, the people and the stress and the effort, and then bring it together with food and get to eat it together, like that's how lifelong bonds are formed.
Yeah, I often comment that I like to see clients arrive as clients and clients leave as friends, and to me, part of that is that opportunity to share, whether it be harvesting an animal, harvesting a fish, like you say, an abalone, whatever it might be, but the opportunity to then take that product and turn it into something that's an experience. And I take that as a real challenge, and sometimes it's pretty difficult with weather, and we have our challenges, but to see someone go out at the end of the time with me as a friend, as someone I'll keep in contact with, and someone who shares so many memories of that 5 to 10 days is really special to us.
Yeah. Well, the quality, oh man, there's some birds working a bait over here. Look at that. Just fish up on the surface crashing. I love that. So exciting. These mountains rising straight out of the ocean is also really cool.
The views, eh?
The first day that we got here, went out and sighted in rifles, which should be, every hunter's first order of business after they drop gear, and they travel to a new place. We went out to scout a little bit, and when we peeled around that corner way up high, and we were able to look over Avon Valley, and there was, snow-capped peaks behind us that spilled down into this big, broad valley that, is turned into tremendous wine country. Of all of the places that I've traveled in the world, I don't know that I've seen anywhere quite so beautiful. You've got 20 acres, and your security camera can see about 50 feet from your Wi-Fi router. Your gate, your barn, your equipment, all the places you actually need to monitor, they're exactly where your Wi-Fi doesn't reach. That's where Defend security cameras make a lot of sense. They work on cellular, just like your phone. But here's what's clever. They've got an embedded SIM card that automatically connects to the best network in your area. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. It finds whatever's strongest. No choosing providers, no contracts, no hassle. I'm using Defend cameras at my place. You mount it, open the Defend app on your phone, and you're done. 10 minutes. Clear footage, night vision, instant alerts, and here's something you need to know. Defend doesn't sell your data. Not to China, not to tech companies, not to anyone. They work for you, period. Defend your place.
I guess for me, I grew up in the top of the South, and so it's a very special place. But also, I think you're right. There's places in New Zealand where you've got very mountainous territory, There's areas in New Zealand where you've got lowlands and then out into the ocean and the braided rivers. But I feel we're really lucky where I'm positioned, where we've got the ocean, within an hour and 20 minutes of drive of the lodge. We're in the mountains, and we can have your wife at a winery, or have you both at a winery for lunch and be back in time for hunting. So to me, the location is unbelievably good and I guess that's why I've stayed there all my life. To me, it has all those opportunities. I can be hunting, I can be on the ocean, I can be sitting at a restaurant or a winery trying some of the local Sauv Blanc wine, all within probably an hour to an hour and 20 minutes.
I say all the time that the future of hunting is amphibious. I would say that the past of hunting is amphibious as well. I strongly encourage people to try spearfishing if they can, but even if they're uncomfortable getting in the water, or they haven't gotten trained to be a free diver yet, being able to connect fishing with a hunting adventure is going to add so much depth and really brings in that safari aspect. Pretty brutal pack out on that big red stag that Landon got the other day. He died in a gnarly place, and because you have this meat processing business and there's a bunch of legal requirements around that for like the timeline that an animal has to get extracted and things like that. You just jumped in your helicopter and flew over there and airlifted him out.
Yeah, I did. I'm lucky, incredibly lucky to have a pilot's license, a helicopter license, and to have a helicopter based at our lodge. And so the opportunity for us when hunters take an animal that's in a difficult spot is to still be able to recover it and recover it fast, maintaining the quality of meat, but also maintaining the opportunity to recover all that meat and get that into a usable fashion is really important and very close to my heart. So I enjoy the opportunity, and I enjoy seeing these animals making their way. Obviously we'll take something out of the carcass ourselves to try, but we also have a chance to put that meat into the market. So we own a wild meat processing factory, so 100% wild. We don't handle any products that aren't wild. And
let me just interrupt you real quick to let people know how much I could wish they could see you navigating this boat through two gnarly currents that are intersecting right now as we're going past this old stone lighthouse, and you're multitasking beautifully. So I appreciate it. But keep going. Tell me about the meat processing.
Yeah, so I bought the meat processing business about 9 years ago, and I bought it for a number of reasons, which I won't spend a lot of time boring you on, but my passion around seeing animals that need to be culled and numbers reduced, or quality animals left, and the opportunity that New Zealand presents in that was to find a way where those animals could be culled and then put through a process where they could be then served in restaurants. The opportunity for New Zealanders as such to be able to try wild meats that they may not be a hunter, they may not even particularly be interested in hunting, but I wanted to see how we could take that product to the market and see how we could take that waste stream in New Zealand's case, with high numbers of animals from goats to deer to wild boar, rabbits, hares, wallabies, all of those products. And so I purchased the factory, and the processing plant had a pretty small size. There was about 7 or 8 staff, and today we have about 35 butchers on the floor, and we handle probably closer to 50,000 carcasses of wild animals a year. And I've been privileged.
50,000?
In total. Obviously thinking about things like small game with rabbits and hares and so forth, there were higher numbers of those, but across all the spectrum of animals, we would handle around 50,000 carcasses a year.
And is most of that consumed domestically here in New Zealand?
Yes, it is. I would think 80% would be consumed within the New Zealand market, 70% somewhere around there, and then around 30% would make its way offshore. And one of the opportunities that we've developed over the time is that, some parts of the animal may not be able to be used for human consumption or may not be saleable as human consumption. And so we've developed a opportunity to sell those products into the pet food market as well. So if you look at any one carcass, we'll take out all the prime cuts that we see as being saleable, and we may take like the grinding, the mince cuts as well, and then anything left, including all the non-weight bearing bones, those types of things, are then all turned into a pet food mix. So utilisation of carcass is really important, and for me has been quite a proud couple of years seeing that all coming in to fruition, and also walking into restaurants in New Zealand and seeing those wild animals on restaurant menus which weren't available before.
That's incredible. And what a great thing to do for pets as well. Like a lot of pet food is pretty gnarly. Something that bothers me that I think a lot of people don't know is in the United States, the Mars family, like Mars candy bars, they own most of the vet clinics in the United States. They also own most of the pet food in the United States. And if that same thing happened for people, where one company controlled all of the food and all of the hospitals, folks would rightfully be pretty suspicious of that.
Yep.
Right? So if you can use wild game products to create pet food, that's a good thing. I like that.
There's some great science around wild diet for pets, and generally we have a combination of non-weight bearing bones offal from those animals.
Non-weight bearing, is that what?
Non-weight bearing, yeah.
Okay.
So typically your ribs, your neck bones, all of your spinal system, but leg bones and weight-bearing bones tend to prove to be difficult to process and can be a little more difficult for pets to digest, especially if they end up in a splintered state.
Yeah, interesting.
And then with offal, obviously heart, liver, lungs, so a great combination when you look at that. What you're feeding your pet has got a whole range of meat, bones, and offal, just like they would have had in a wild state. Yeah,
those the nutrients in organs are incredibly important for these canines and felines, and we know that because if you look at how a wolf or a coyote or a cougar or something like that consumes an animal, the very first thing that they're going to eat is those organs, right? We think of them as killing animals to eat meat because that's what we're focused on as humans, but in reality, the organs are the more important thing for those predators, and we just have domestic versions of those living in our homes. Yeah. And you came from the honey industry first, right?
I did. I spent the majority of my career in the honey industry, from actually training as a beekeeper and working in the field for around 15 years as a beekeeper, and then progressing into markets and developing brands overseas, and spent the latter 15 years of my career developing offshore brands within my honey business. So I have been lucky enough to travel extensively and also, I guess, meet people from around the world and cuisines from around the world.
If we need to crack a window, it's all right. So, folks, you might hear a little bit of wind noise here, but we're fogging up, so that's just what it is. We're doing podcasts in the wild like we've often done before. Looks like we've got some crayfish traps up here ahead of us.
Yeah.
Don't want to run
We'll
them
dodge
over.
around them.
Yep. Tell me some interesting things about bees. They're a fascinating organism.
Very fascinating and interesting enough for me. I guess part of my early reason for getting involved or wanting to get involved in the industry and do my apprenticeship was the whole factor of what that fascinated me around the bee and what it did. But fascinating facts for me, probably one bee flies the equivalent of halfway around the world and produces half a teaspoon of honey if he's lucky enough to be in that at the time of the year that honey's produced, which is a lot when you think about distance and half a teaspoon. Probably a lot of people don't realise that a queen bee, the male bee and the worker bee all come from the same egg, so they all start off in the Same
from
thing.
the
It's
same egg?
from the same egg. So it's only what they're fed that determines what they end up.
Interesting.
So very fascinating to work with when you're looking at using the same egg for everything that's from the starting point, and then looking at what it turns into, whether it be a drone, a queen, or a worker bee.
Wow. Which of all the classes of bees, the jobs, which one do you have the most respect for?
Probably the queen bee. The queen bee, and if you looked at her job within the hive, her longevity, and her ability to control and manipulate and manage what happens around the beehive and direct is probably the right word, is incredibly fascinating, and I have huge respect and overall.
So what is that job? What all does she do?
So the queen bee obviously lays eggs, which are then turned into worker bees, but she can also lay an egg and tell the hive that they need to produce another queen bee if she's failing, or she's decided she's overpopulated and needs to move on, in which case they'll produce another queen. It'll hatch, and she will instruct the hive how that's to happen, and then when that queen is ready, the old queen will fly off and take half the bees with them, and that's how you get your succession of beehives, and that's what protects, I guess, our bees from becoming extinct, because that produces another colony. She also has the ability to choose male or to produce male bees. So at certain times, where that might be when she's producing another queen, or certain times of the year where they require male bees within the hive, she can then direct the hive to produce wax cells the right size for that, and then lay eggs into that herself, and then they are fed the correct amount of food and royal jelly, which then turns them into male bees.
How does she communicate that to the other bees?
That's a good question. The majority of communication within the beehive is done with noise and dances. So if you look at the general discussion between bees or worker bees, then it is a dance with a bunch of noise. And so if they find for instance, if they find a source of nectar that's very prominent or favourable, they'll come back to the hive, and you can actually see them at times when you're working and perform a dance on the wax comb, and that's directing the rest of the hive to where that source is and how far away it is.
The wiggle dance.
The wiggle dance. That's it.
I love it.
I think that, talking about the apiculture industry, for me, it's a little bit like hunting. You've got to be in touch with the whole wider spectrum. You've got to understand seasons. You've got to understand what makes things happen and why, and you've got to be receptive and very. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the right word to use, but you have to be able to read what's happening to be able to predict what's going to come next. And I think that's what I enjoyed in the honey industry. Also, when I was working, was trying to work out when flowers were going to flower and why and how long. And I liken that to the same type of thing with what we're doing today in the hunting industry, where we do our best to try and understand exactly what the season's looking like and where the animals might be. And probably no different today, where we're diving and fishing and trying to work out what depth the fish are at the moment, and where they're living and what they're doing and why.
Yeah, you told me if you want to find abalone, you have to look in places where an abalone will be. And as a guy who's never got to dive for them, that didn't mean very much. But after you showed me and I could see, okay, this is abalone habitat, then for the rest of the day, when I found spots that were similar to that, I could dive down and I could find an abalone there.
Yeah, I think it's like stalking an animal, right? You've got to work out what you're stalking and why and where, and then put your strategy in place. And even abalone, effectively, they don't move around flat out. They're very, very slow movers, and you're not chasing them. But it's the same mentality for me. Is you learn where that typical spot might be. Whether it's that spot where that elk might be hanging out, or that red deer, or that abalone, or that fish. Is working that out and putting that into place when you get out there to go, well, where am I going to start looking and how am I going to conduct this? And yeah, my cheeky comment today to you about you got to hunt them down was from a point of view of you've got to work out what that terrain looks like and where they're likely to be stationed, and then you start to understand where you're going to find that abalone and how you're going to dive down and collect it.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense to me. Afterwards, on the front end, it's a bit helpless, but as soon as you start to put it together, that makes sense. And now in the future, if I see a rock that looks like that, I'm going to drop down there and see if there's an abalone on it.
Yep.
I want to do a little bit of New Zealand hunting myth busting. Now, there's lots of public land hunting opportunities in New Zealand, but if folks are seeing an especially large individual, regardless of the species, chances are that came from private land. Your place, I don't know if I could walk across it in a day. So while it is high fence, your fences are not. I don't know if you know this. You for sure do. Your fences are for sure not high enough to keep those animals in there if they want to leave.
Nope.
They're 6-foot fences,
Yep.
and I know from my previous fencing experience with animals of this size, and I've seen red stag clear even taller fences in Texas. Yeah, you've got fences, but that's not keeping them in there, and it is a huge piece of really complex ground. It's a very real hunt.
Yeah, it is, and I guess from my point of view, I'm a passionate hunter, and I want what we provide as a hunt to be as challenging, as enjoyable as what I would expect wherever I went. And so I've driven all of my thought pattern and my process around setting up Avon Valley over the last 10 years around that. And you're right, New Zealand has a lot of open country that's unmanaged, and probably for a lot of listeners, they may not realise that New Zealand has a very, very high population of red deer, and a lower population of elk, but in certain places a number of elk and fallow. And the issue for New Zealand is we don't have any predators. We have no predators whatsoever for the deer population, or the goats, or the rams, or elk. And so the survival is extremely high.
And you have tremendous habitat as well. Like there's ample feed, there's lots of ground. There's nothing that is going to kill these animals besides hunters or starvation from old age after their teeth wear out.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's not the way we want to see animals go. That's an ugly end.
I totally agree, and the other thing is education, and I think the United States and a lot of parts of the world can take huge credit for your education and your understanding of aging animals and harvesting and size and the particulars that sit around that. And what you'll find in New Zealand in general, away from the hunting or outfitting and safaris, is that understanding of aging and genetics and so forth is very, very low, and that has been driven partly because our government, none of these animals are native to New Zealand, and so our government sees them as pests, and generally as New Zealanders we're brought up seeing them as pests. And so rather than looking at it as a resource, they are looked at as a pest, and that is one of the key reasons why there has never been any great development in genetics in the general wild in New Zealand unless they've escaped from deer farms.
I was surprised to hear that the New Zealand government is using the poison 1080 to kill wildlife. That seems like an opportunity for a lot of consequence.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a very, very touchy subject, New Zealand, and incredibly annoying for hunters and for a lot of people. I guess to put some context around that is the government sees the native birds, the native animals as being their priority to look after, and so while they're not directly looking at killing deer or so forth with the poisons, they are definitely a by-kill of that process, and we've got a example of that only a few weeks ago where they were looking to kill stoats, rats and possums on an island and have taken out a large percentage of the whitetail population there as a a by-kill, which is absolutely disaster for New Zealand. So I think education and understanding that is important, but also I'm very much with you on the fact that I don't see there is a need to be using that. I see that resource should be getting harvested, should be getting used through places like our factory, through other factories where that meat can be put as a resource.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with something as toxic as 1080, where it has third and fourth order effects. It's whatever eats the animal that died is also going to die, and things like pets are incredibly sensitive to it. If a dog rolls on a possum that's been killed by it from ingesting poison pellets, it's going to kill that dog. Like this is a serious toxin. But enough about that. Some other myth busting. Recently, year or more ago, I went to Australia, and the time change there, the jet lag, was absolutely brutal. And people think of Australia and New Zealand as like very, very close together, and maybe don't even differentiate the two in their minds very much. They're wildly different places, different people, different accents. The jet lag for me coming from the West Coast to here was easier than from me going from the West Coast to the East Coast of the United States. It's only a 3 or 4 hour time zone change. And it was just a non-factor. Like, I was ready to go the day that I got here, and I really wasn't expecting that. The flight wasn't bad. It was much easier to travel here than I'd made it out in my mind.
Yeah, I found it fascinating this year, James, at the SCI and DSC conventions, the number of people who visited my booth, and the first thing they said is, "Oh gosh, New Zealand, that's a long way away." And I think when you sit down and look at it, from most places coming out of the United States, you're looking at about a 12 or 13 hour flight into Auckland, and then about a 1 hour, 1.5 hour flight down to us. And I agree with you. I travel back and forwards on that route a lot, and I find it incredibly simple, incredibly easy. I just did Africa last season for us. We got 2 12-hour flights into Africa, huge time change, real challenge on the body. Got up to Africa and kind of felt like we were dead on our feet for the first 3 days, where I was privileged to be back and forwards into the US 3 times in late January, early February, and I find that the route between New Zealand and US is pretty simple and generally has a low impact on your body.
And a hot tip, people, I would recommend taking that red-eye flight, because you just sleep on the plane, you're going to wake up and you're going to be here, and you can just go straight into it, and don't worry about it. I swear to you, I've spent far more hours worrying about the jet lag than that flight actually took. It's just not a big deal. Another very interesting thing, because of your situation here with the meat processing, most international hunts in the world, you cannot bring that meat back to the U.S., but with this hunt, you actually can. That is a huge, huge separation from every other international hunt I've done in my life.
Yeah, it's a simple process for us. We get the meat processed through the factory. We get it vacuumed down and blast frozen to -20. We give you the correct paperwork that you need to have with it, and you can literally check it in at the airport. And as long as you're not transiting through Australia or Fiji or somewhere like that, as long as you're traveling on a direct route into the US and it's checked luggage, you have no issues. And I can speak from recent experience. I took 50 pound in January and 50 pound of venison in February to the US, and both times declared it, went through the customs process. Probably both times I could say I think I bet the rest of our crew through customs and out the other side, and no issues whatsoever. So a really good opportunity to take something back. You've only really got your photos and your meat that you can have for the first 12 months. By the time your trophies make it back and either are mounted or expedited, you're not going to see them for some time. So it's been really proud for us this season to see a number of clients who've gone home and then sent us photos or sent us posts of their cooking up their venison or their fallow or their elk and I guess reliving their time in New Zealand once they're back home.
And sharing that, because increasingly, and I've talked about this so much before, but increasingly my favorite aspect of hunting is sharing that meat with friends and family, the people that I love. And it is my best mechanism to get them to share in that, not only that food, but also that experience, right? If I'm cooking up a red stag steak and, serving that to somebody that I care about, and then I get to talk about the hunt that I got to have here at Avon Valley Safari, like it just means a lot more than showing somebody a photo on your phone and being like, yeah, man, it was incredible. Now I'm kind of counting my chickens before they've hatched here, because I've not yet pulled the trigger on a red stag. However, you've got a good guide staff. I feel confident that we're going to be able to turn something up, and I'm excited for the opportunity. I've got to look at some incredible animals already, and I got to say, as a lifelong elk hunter, it does something to you to look down into this thick timber and watch one of these animals turn their head and just see the absolute massive antler that is on there. They're pretty cool, and they act so much like elk that I keep trying to find differences between them and elk, where I don't know how many differences there actually are. They are so incredibly similar.
Very, yeah. I mean, obviously you have even more extensive knowledge on the elk than I will ever have, but from my understanding and from the work I've done in New Zealand, hunting red stag and hunting elk here, they're very, very similar. They conduct a number of, I guess you call them processes or habits, very similarly to each other.
And they kind of act like the bees too, right? They're making noise. They're moving around in a way to communicate with each other. It's pretty cool. A lot of the early elk research that I did, I focused on red stag literature from the United Kingdom, because they have records going back to the 1400s, and there's simply more information about red stag over the centuries there that have been recorded by those gamekeepers than we will ever have with elk in North America. And because they are so similar, I was able to get a deeper understanding of elk earlier on in my studies than I could have without the red stag. I think it's also interesting to think about the history of hunting this animal as sort of a social, a big social element. Like red stag is kind of an estate hunt if you go back in those logs over time. It was either done on estates or is done by poachers.
Yep.
And today's poachers are rugrats like me who are out there hooking and jabbing on public land, which is not to say that they're poachers at all. I'm totally kidding here, but the economic class disparity can kind of be there. However, it is less expensive to travel here and go stag hunting than it is to book a bull elk hunt in the American West, and go do that with an outfitter. So that's also something that I would love for people to consider. And if they want to preserve their fall in North America for a type of hunt, they can come down here now in March and April, and they can have that same rut experience and still be able to kind of have their cake and eat it too at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the rut here for us in New Zealand generally starts in that mid-March through to sort of late April. Sometimes elk start a little earlier here, and fallow generally start a little later. But there's a real opportunity to come down New Zealand and hunt through that rut time. And look, if that doesn't work, we still continue to hunt all of those species, including with the bow. And we can do that right through to kind of the end of July. Generally, we see antlers starting to fall off and shed around mid-August, so we see hunting coming to an end in July. But we took a number of red stag and elk, fallow by bow right up until the end of July last year.
Beyond hunting, you're also a working cattle operation, a working sheep operation. You've got row crops. You've still got bees. I'm a firm believer that the best way to take care of an ecosystem is to respect and utilize a combination of conservation, recreation, and agriculture. And you are a shining example of how that can work.
Yeah, it's really important for us at Avon Valley and across our ranch to have a diversity, and that, like you've referred to, that we run about 3,500 breeding sheep. We run around 300 Black Angus cattle, breeding cows, and we have the wild game operation, and then obviously the safaris and the honey. It falls into that category as well. So to me, I was lucky enough to purchase this land 10 years ago, and it's been my passion all the way through to develop the whole picture and the whole piece of that ranch into something that had robustness, had consistency, and it had diversity, and that takes us through the highs and the lows. If you look at COVID, when New Zealand was shut for 3 years for hunting, we were able to carry on ranching and carry on the business. So I think it's really important when you look across the opportunity that I've been given to be able to purchase that property, to make sure that I do the best by the land and the best by the animals.
You also work extremely hard to make sure that your customers are happy, and so does all of your staff. I have tremendous appreciation for that, and there's a lot of details that I think most people that come here who are not outfitters are going to miss, and I see them at every step, right? I notice that when your guides pull up that the side-by-sides have been cleaned out. I notice that they're all carrying sharp knives. I notice that when they skin, my goodness, the job that Kate did skinning that fallow buck last night, she's going to put taxidermists out of business. Like, there's no fleshing to be done. Very, very precise work and lots of attention to detail, lots of emphasis on safety, but also just on making sure that people are comfortable and that they're achieving their version of success. And you guys are checking in often to make sure that that's happening. And well done. You're a solid outfit.
Thank you, James. Look, for me, it's incredibly important that you're coming halfway around the world for a blind date, I say to people, and you're turning up not really knowing me unless you've been referred to us, and you put your trust in me to provide that service, to provide that week, 2 weeks, whatever it might be, of fun. And I take that really seriously. And a lot of people at the shows this year ask me, will you be my guide? And I'm like, no, I can guide. I'm a passionate hunter, but is that the best use of my time? No, it's not. The best use of my time has been around the lodge, been around you, been around your hunt, been around the whole operation to make sure that all of those things are happening and happening in a way that you will leave, one, as a friend, but two, as a very happy person and a happy client. And that's incredibly important. And I'd say that flows through to all of my staff. I've been lucky. I've got incredibly good guides. I've got great people on the ground all around me. And that is a passion of mine. I believe that if we've got happy people, we've got staff that have incredible skills, that just makes your time with us so much more exciting. If you look at Carrie's role as a 2IC to me, her whole dedication is around making sure that right from the day you reach out to us to come down to New Zealand or consider coming to New Zealand, that you're answered in a timely manner, that you're given the correct information. And then when you do choose, if you choose to come down and hunt with us, the process that goes on board with getting every piece of your hunt planned out as best we can, understanding what you want your wife to do, if you've got buddies coming down, what they want to achieve. And if I look at what the services that Carrie provides to a client, I think that's a really important piece that is often missed when it comes to making someone's trip. well beyond what they expected.
Yeah. Well, I obviously, you want people to come down and hunt with you, and I do too. More than anything, I want people to have the experience of getting to see New Zealand and come down here and just see this place, because it is freaking awesome. I can tell all of you guys with absolute certainty that if you come and book with Darren, you're going to have that experience. But if you could decide to go somewhere else, just go, man. Like, come down here and have this adventure, because it is an absolute, like, something that you should do. And if it's not on your bucket list, put it on there and figure out a way to make this happen. We are coming into the Arm. We're not too far out from the harbor here, and just like I got to have very, very fresh abalone today that I just dove down to the bottom of the ocean to get, I'm going to make sure you guys get a very fresh podcast. So I'm going to get off here and I'm going to upload this thing. And Darren, you and I are going to get back together at the end of this week to do a -2 of this podcast, and hopefully get to talk about my hunt.
Yeah, thanks, James. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate you putting the trust in me to pull something together for you while you're in New Zealand, and the buddies that are travelling down, and wives with you, and hopefully on Friday we can reminisce about the whole week.
Yeah, cheers. Okay, folks, if this is the only one you listen to, check out Avon Valley Safaris. You can learn more about this. If you have more questions, you can reach out to these guys, and they'll get back to you just as quick as they can. And in the meantime, hope everybody's having fun, going on adventures, and eating good food. Catch y'all later. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their busy lives to write a review for the show and share it with their friends. I'm extremely proud of how intelligent, engaged, and adventurous this audience is. Original music for the Six Ranch podcast is written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Harlander. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.